Hi folks, this is Meredith from the Papery Craftery, and today we're going to be making some quilling paper clematis flowers. For the petals, they're going to be striped. So I have two colors here. This is the 2mm paper from Julia. I showed a couple of videos back. I got a big pack of 60 colors. So today I'm going to be using the hot pink and the baby pink. And then I also have a bit of pale yellow from Quilt Creations. I have the standard 1/8 inch wide, and I also have 3/8 inch wide paper in the same color. I'm going to be using my slotted tool today for quilling, but you can use a needle tool. I have a small paintbrush, some craft scissors, tweezers, and then for one part, I'm going to be using my crimper. This is my favorite, with the 6 different ways to crimp paper on there. And then I have my cork board with parchment paper and pins, Elmer's glue all for majority of my work today, and the needle nose bottle, and then a little bit of the tacky glue for when we start putting everything together. So let's go ahead and look at some inspiration pictures for today. This is the clematis flower. It's a vine. Some people pronounce it as Clematis. My mama said to say Clematis, rhymes with tomatoes. But there's a million different varieties. I really got interested in these striped petals here, the hot pink striped petals. They have a little bit of a kind of fluttery edges to them as well. A little bit of fringe around the stamen in the middle. But then I got really interested in a closer look here, kind of the ball of fringe right in the center. And I wanted to play around with that as well. So that's what we're going to be working on today. So we're going to start off here with the Julia paper in hot pink. And that is going to be the center stripe down each one of our petals. I like to keep this thin paper inside the packaging and just take out one strip at a time, or multiple if I know I'm going to need that, just so I don't have to kind of wrestle getting it back into that little skinny envelope. We are going to be using this entire strip, so don't worry about measurements. I just tore off one end just to make the finishing of this shape a little bit smoother. Remember, torn edges in quilling make a nice smooth edge when you're going to glue that down. And all I'm doing is rolling it up end to end on my slotted tool. You can use whatever tool you like. And I want it to open up, not 100% all the way, but I'm just kind of controlling it in between my fingers until it has a little bit of unopened rim on the outside. Not a ton, just a little bit. And I'm squeezing both ends into a marquee shape. So that's just squeezing both sides into a point without pushing on the center too much. Get that to be smoothed down. And there you go. So it's like kind of a long diamond shape is what you're going to be looking for that piece. Set that aside. We're going to be taking 2 pieces of this baby pink. Again, full length. Don't worry about tearing or measuring this at all. And we're going to be using that to make the outer edges of that striped flower. Whatever color you choose for the outer edges, just bear in mind you're going to use a lot more of that than you are for the center stripe. So just make sure you have enough of whatever colors you like. And this process is pretty much the same as the marquee. So we're going to roll it all the way to the end and then let it open up in a similar way. But we want it to be a little bit bigger of a coil. So we're going to let it open up even a little bit more. I know sometimes people will just put these down on a flat surface or use one of the kind of circle templates to get the size they want. I don't love those. I always have a hard time getting my coils out, so I just like to do it in my hands. And this time we're going to be making a half moon, which was me bending kind of the edges over a little bit. See the points? I'm squeezing points again and then pushing up into the center to make a shape like this. You're going to be using both strips in the same way. So now I have two of those, two half moons and the one marquee. And you can kind of guess what's going to happen. We're going to glue those together. So I have just a white glue, Elmer's glue wall in my needle nose container, and that's strong enough to keep this together. Because I let the light pink open up a little bit more, it's going to be a little bit bigger. So the two pieces together of the lighter pink are going to sandwich that hot pink right in the center. You can use a stronger glue for this if you like. Just bear in mind it might be a little bit gloppier and hard to control. But the white glue will work fine. You'll just have to hold it for a couple of seconds just to make sure that everything stays. And you don't want to push too hard on either side because this thin paper could dry unevenly. And then it might not have the look you're going for. One of the layers of paper might be a little bit higher than the others. So you want to make sure all these layers are level in the three different shapes we did there. And that is the shape that we are looking for the basic part of this petal. But we're going to add a little bit more details because remember it had that kind of fluttery outside. To start with though, we're going to take another piece of the paper that we used for the two outer layers, the baby pink, and with another thin line of glue all the way on the outside, I'm just going to wrap this other strip around 2 times. This is not necessary. It's not going to alter the look of your flower too much, except we're giving it a point on the end. So notice I left a little bit of space before I turned the corner to do the opposite side from where I started, with a little bit of a peak of negative space there, right at the top. That's going to help us get these petals to be a little bit pointier and look more like they do on the plant itself. So when I got to the bottom, I wrapped it around without leaving any extra space for a little bit of a point. But then I'm going to do the same thing for a second layer. A little bit of glue, get the edge all lined up. Add a little bit extra space at the top to make a little point. Just like that. There it is. And then add some glue to the other side. I'm actually just going to go ahead and measure this with my eyes first and snip off the extra. Put that aside. And then get this other side glued down here. So again, this is doing 2 things. It's kind of giving a little bit of an extra peak at the end to make our flower petal even more pointed. And it's also just kind of making the entire petal look a little bit more polished and pulled together. You can use paper towel to wipe off any gluey bits. They are always handy. Keep a damp paper towel next to you while you're working. And now we're going to use a little bit more of that same baby pink, that pale pink paper on our second smallest set of teeth in our crimper here, and get that through. Oop, a little stuck here. What's happening? All right. What in the world? Okay. Just didn't keep going. Probably should finish rolling it all the way through. There we go. Oof. That was weird. Okay. So now we're going to use this crimped paper in a similar way that we just did with the extra strip around the edge. But this time, because it's crimped, it's going to make the edge of our petal look nice and fluttery. And that's going to look even more so like the flower petals from our inspiration pictures. But to make it stick a little bit faster and a little bit easier, I'm just going to put a little bit of tacky glue on my workboard here. I'm using my needle tool just to put a little bit here and there all along one side of my petal. You can use a toothpick or a paintbrush, whatever you like. And then we're just going to very carefully lay the crimped strip along the edge. Make sure we keep the point that we made along the side, and then run it around the other side. We're going to snip off the excess before we glue down, just so we don't mess up the texture of the crimp while we're holding it and trying to glue and keep it steady at the same time. There we go. Here's a better view. Just a little bit of glue, dot, 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 all the way along the edge there. And then just wrap this around to make sure that it's even and drying level. And that's pretty much it to our petal. And the clematis flower is going to have 8 of these. So we're going to do the same thing 8 times. But that's what it should look like at the end. So now we're going to move on to what's going to make the fringed parts of the center of our flower. And we're going to start by making the kind of ball of fringe that is going to make the very center. I'm using the thinner of my 2 yellow papers. So this is just a 1/8 inch wide paper, and the strip is about 18 inches long. And what I'm going to be doing is kind of making like an armature or a mold for the fringe to go around. Because if I just roll up some fringe, the fringe is going to stand straight up in the air. It's not going to be sort of that bald, domed shape of fringe like we saw in the picture in the beginning, which is what intrigued me to these flowers in the first place. So I have a tight foil of this thinner strip of the pale yellow, and I rolled it all the way from end to end, leaving it on my tool and then gluing down the end. I didn't let it open up at all. Push it off the end there, and I want it to have a little bit of a 3D look to it. I'm not going to make a really big extended dome, just pushing it the center out just a tad, about a 1/2 inch high, with my tool or my finger, whatever I can get in there, adding a little bit of glue to the inside and brushing it around so that that shape stays the way I want it to. And that little dome there is what's going to help our fringed paper that we're going to get to next here keep the shape that we want it to have. So here I have the wider of our 2 pale yellows. This is 3/8 inch wide, and I'll have links to all the tools and supplies as usual in the description box for the video. And I have my little craft scissors here, and I am going to just snip. I'm making the tightest little fringe that you can possibly make. And I like to do my fringe work by hand. I think it's a lot easier to control. And it's just a matter of making tons of these little snips over and over again, not going all the way through the paper because that would make it, fall apart on you, but more than halfway. And once I get to the end, just get as close as I can to my fingers here. And that is about it. That's just how I like to make my fringe. I have a lot of videos on this. It's one of my favorite things to do, to add a little bit of texture, especially in flowers. You'll see a lot of this technique used just because that's how flowers are. So I'm going to tear off a little less than half here, somewhere around 3 inches. And I'm going to grab my little dome that I made of the yellow, and I'm going to grab some Elmer's glue, and then I also have a paintbrush nearby. So what I'm going to do essentially is wrap this little domed piece that I made with the fringe, but I don't want the fringe to end up standing straight up in the air. I want all of the fringe to kind of wrap itself around the dome. So that's why I put a little bit of glue all the way up the sides of the dome as well. So then it's just a matter of gluing the bottom edge where it's not snipped, and then also up the dome as well. So you can go slow with this. It's okay if your dome isn't as high as your fringe work is. That's why I would actually advise, not having them be the same height, just because it's going to wrap a little bit easier if you don't have it be the same height. It's going to make it so it's a little bit, it keeps that dome shape instead of just going kind of straight up and down. So I'm going to keep going around just a little bit at a time. Don't worry if your fringe isn't sticking all the way to your inside, your little insert there, the dome piece just yet, because we're going to go over it again with a little bit more glue to make sure that it stays the way we want it to. Get to the end here. There we go. And it is starting to take shape a little bit, but it's still not really giving kind of that full little globe of fringe that I want it to. So what I'm going to end up doing is I put a little bit of glue on the outside and then brush that down just to make sure all these outside pieces of fringe are sticking as well. And now it's getting a little bit closer. You can see it's getting kind of thin on the top, but that's how I want it to be. So it should be much wider at the base and get thinner as it goes up. And brush this back as well. Get all this outside. There we go. Now you can see how it's all has the look of fringe, but it's not going to be the same texture. It's not going to be out and spiky. There we go. Now, bear in mind that back to our original photographs, there is still kind of a ring of other fringe around that center dome. So that's what we're going to be doing now with the rest of our fringe pieces that we cut as well. So we have the rest of that strip. And what I'm doing is using my little dome as kind of a mold, but I'm not gluing this extra piece to the dome. So I'm using it just as a guide to make sure that I'm getting the size that I want, because I just want this second piece of fringe to end up like a ring. And that'll make sense in a second here. So I'm gluing it to itself, just using the dome piece as a guide to make sure that it's not getting too wide. So get a little strip of glue all the way on the end, just on the end now. We're not gluing up that fringe like we did last time. Yeah, a little bit more at the very end there. All right, just get rid of that piece. There we go. A little bit of glue right there. And get that laid down. So now we have our ring of fringe and we have our little dome in the center. And they should not be attached. There should be no glue connecting these two elements we just made. So I'm using my tweezers and just kind of pushing that little domed piece out the bottom. And if any little pieces of your fringe get messed up, go ahead and glue those back down. So now I have my ring of fringe and I have my little dome of fringe. You can spread out the ring a little bit. If you lose some, that's okay. You have plenty. And then I also want to kind of push up the end a little bit. So it's not splayed completely out to the sides. It's kind of out and then standing up a little bit. If that's a pain, don't worry about it. It can just be out to the side. It'll still give a very similar effect. Okay, so I have my two pieces there. And then I also have my 8 petals that we made. I have everything on my workboard covered in parchment. We're going to start putting all of our pieces together. So let's get a little bit more of our tacky glue to start with here. We're going to put the two pieces of fringe back together. And you might be saying, why did we not glue them to begin with? Because if I had done that, they would be on the same level. I don't want them to be on the same level. I want the center dome to be a little bit taller. So in order to do that, I just dipped it in my glue a little bit and I'm just sitting it on the very top of the ring that we made. And let that set aside and dry. We can move on. We're going to put all our petals together. And it's a very different way. Once you look at the flower, they're not in a ring like a lot of flowers are. They're stacked in a kind of unusual way, what I realized studying this plant. So bear with me here. I have 2 petals. I put a little bit of tacky glue on the inside edge of the bottom. And then I'm going to stack a third one on top of those 2. So we have 3 petals kind of in a row there, but one being in the center. Put that aside for a second. We're going to do the same thing, but in the upside down. So I have 2 facing down, same thing, a little bit of tacky glue along the inside edge of those ones. If you want to just use a regular glue, use what you got. It's okay. This just is a little bit quicker to dry, or at least to set, this tacky glue. It's not necessarily all the way dry. It just makes it so you can move things around and they won't fall apart. So now we have our top 3 and we have our bottom 3. But again, we have 8 petals here, so that's not it. The other 2 petals end up being underneath these little groupings that we just made. So I would recommend letting this just set for a second, especially if you're not using the tacky glue. And then we're going to put the other 2 pieces on. So even though we set it aside and it's set, it's not completely dry yet, which is kind of important here for the next part. So these 2 are going to be underneath those 2 sections. So I have a little bit of glue going down either side. And it's sort of a juggling act here for a second, even with the tacky glue starting to set up. Just give yourself some grace if it sort of falls apart. Just put everything back together. There we go. So we have our top one on. Half of those 2 bottom petals. Oops, see what I mean? It's okay if it moves around a little bit. Just fix it. And there is our bottom 2. So like I said, this is a very particular kind of setting of the petals. They're not in a circle. They're not in a ring. They don't all overlap each other in the same direction. They're kind of stacked in just kind of an odd way. Now we're going to let that set a little bit, and we're going to push in our center here. And it's okay if your little fringe starts moving around, because when you manhandle it, it will kind of move around a little bit, and that's okay. You can also wait to do this part, adjusting your fringe until you get all of your flower elements together and everything dries. It won't be moving around as much. It's up to you. But here we go. That's what it should look like here. And we're going to dip the bottom again in some blue around the outside of the bottom there, and just plop that right in the center. Just adjust if needed. And you can leave it be at this point. You can just have kind of your flower be as flat as it wants to be. It will pick up a little bit around the edges just by pushing that center in. But if you want to, you can make it even more 3-dimensional. You can use your hands like I'm showing here. You can do this technique that I sort of came up with a few flowers ago. I don't remember which flower it is offhand, but I used the parchment on my workboard and pinned it in place in a kind of a little hill behind the flower, and then just used some pins to keep the flower where I wanted it to be. So as it dried against that hill of parchment paper, it sort of keeps a shape of having a little bit of a more 3-dimensional quality to it, so it's not all just flat. It's up to you. You can do that however you like. But that is our clematis flower for today. That's pretty much it. It ends up being a pretty good size flower. It's a couple inches around. Here's another one that's completely dry, and you can see the edges are lifting up a little bit there because I did let it dry against the parchment, and it's going to keep kind of a shape where it's not completely flat. You can also, if you want to, when you're making your flower and you want to have it be a little bit more 3-dimensional, you can put it into a quilling mold, which I've done many times for flowers. I flip it upside down and kind of push it into that shape there, and that will, as it dries, keep a little bit of a dome shape. Or you can use a lid to a jar if you have one that's the right size. It's up to you. But like I said, the fluttery edges and that center ball kind of intrigued me a lot for this flower. I had actually never heard of them, but after I take my dog for a walk every day, and I saw a bunch of them. They actually are a whole bunch in my neighborhood around mailboxes and things like that. They're just really pretty. They're big and they're bold and they're just fun to make. So As always, please leave any questions you have in the comment section and I'll answer them as soon as I can. Look in the description box for links to all the tools and supplies that I use if you want to make your own flowers. You'll also find there a link to my Buy Me a Coffee page where you can find some quilling extras, some ways to support the channel. It really helps me be able to make these videos week after week, and any support you have given or will continue to give is always greatly, incredibly appreciated. And there's also a new quilling paper conversion guide for those who need to switch from US measurements to metric. You can find that there. And also, please take care of yourselves. Look out for your neighbors. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you can be around for the next video, and I will see you then. Thanks so much for watching. Bye-bye.